Hi, this is AJ Moye, and you're listening to Indiana Sports Beat with Jim Coyle.
Today's guest is brought to you by Reynolds Family Dentistry of Sellersburg. You need $1 million smile for those championship photos, and that's exactly what you'll get with Reynolds Family Dentistry. Welcome back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, Indiana Sports Beat. Jim Coyle with you as always, and I couldn't be happier to have one of my absolute favorite value players of all time, a good friend from a long time ago, Pat Graham. Pat, how are you, brother?
Doing good. How are you?
I cannot complain. I'm talking to you, so that's a great thing. I haven't gotten to see you in quite a while, but a guy from we both went to Floyd Central High School, and Pat was probably the greatest player that ever came through there, and that's a long line of great players. And speaking of that, Southern Indiana used to always get they didn't get as much notoriety as the northern side of the state, but man, there are a lot of guys, just the southern part of the state, but even Floyd Central, man, there's a lot of great players that come from that way.
Well, it's, you know, I kind of, even back when that was always kind of the running joke that Southern Indiana got forgotten, this and that, and I never wanted to use an excuse or anything, but, you know, we still, even down here, I live now in Evansville, Indiana, and I said, you know, we always kind of laugh that we don't get the pub down here. I said, well, don't worry about it. I've lived it since I was, you know, in the 80s when I was at Floyd Central, so I guess it's just kind of a running joke, but yeah, there's some decent players in Southern Indiana. Always has been. Of
course, you mentioned you've been down in Evansville for quite a time. A family, you got a couple of kids. Your wife, who actually her father was my football coach in high school. A great time. But you've got a couple of kids now that are growing up and going through what you went through playing high school basketball. What's that like as a father now? Because I know for me, high school still seems like it wasn't that long ago, but unfortunately it was. But you're getting to live it through your kids now. That's got to be fun.
It's maybe one of these days I'll be able to say I enjoyed it, but you know, I've always said watching sports, coaching sports, coaching your kids, and again, there's a hell of a lot of high school and even football and baseball coaches that's had to coach their kids, and even back when you and I were in high school and stuff, but it's not fun. I'll be honest with you, it's not as fun as it should be because, and I've always said this, I've always said it's a lot easier playing than coaching. And then when you have a son out there also, or two sons out there, yeah, there's a different nervousness to it, I guess. There's a different, because again, when you're not playing and you're not in control, you know, it's always someone else has the control. That's not as much fun as a coach, or to me it isn't. And maybe one of these days I'll look back and say, man, that was fun. I'm sure one of these days I will, and I'm kind of joking about it. But it's different, and it's, you know, it's not all fun and games and laughter. There's been some tough nights, but it is what it is. I have two good kids, and they work their asses off. But, yeah, one of these days I'll be able to look back and say I had a little bit more fun than I do right now.
And Evansville's a great area for high school basketball. Of course, Christian Lander from down there, but you had Alex Hemingway, just went to Clemson, and always a lot of talent. Calbert Cheney, of course, from there, amongst many, many others. But a great area for basketball. How's your kids? I think they go to Evansville Harrison, right, or Memorial?
No, they go to Evansville Memorial.
Memorial, yeah,
they go to Memorial. Yep.
And how's Memorial going to be?
Well, we had a pretty dang good year last year. We had two. You know, we were led by two kids that were predominantly football players. One, Michael Lindauer, went to Cincinnati, and the other one went to Southern Illinois, Branson Combs. And we had Sam DeVault, who signed it basketball to Austin Peay. So we lost an awful lot this year, but we got, you know, again, it's the roller coaster. It's the up and downs, and we'll be a little young this year, but you know, we've done this before.
And we talked a little bit about this off air. It's not just high school, college as well, but the game is different today. The kids are different today. The way they're treated, the way they're coached, approached. Some of them are coddled. There's a lot of things that you can't do today, and some of it justifiably. But then there's other things that you can't do because somebody's going to get mad or somebody's not getting enough playing time or whatever.
It's a It's a different thing. Again, back when you and I were doing this, and good friend of ours, Todd Leary, we've talked about it. It just was a different time. Now, does that make that time better than today? I'm not saying that. It was just a different time, and the way things are done today, and you're always worrying about kids. Back where. In Floyd Central, if you lived on this street, you went to Floyd Central. You lived on this street, you went to New Albany, and you lived on this street, you went to Charleston. And there was no questions about it. And today, with kids being able to go anywhere they want as a freshman, it's a different time. And of course, AAU's grown to the point of, in some sports, it's the AAU stuff or the out of season stuff has taken over high school sports. There's a number of kids I know that are wonderful and great soccer players, and they don't even play for their high school teams because they're out, doing this travel stuff. And I've jokingly, I've joked about it, but then in part of me, I say, I don't know here in 10 years, what high school sports do we still have? And it is changing. And I hope somehow it gets a grip to where we get back a little bit of control. But, I've said that I've thought, I never thought this time would come where you could go any school you want, and you live on the east side and go to the west side for a school or north side or wherever. I mean, it doesn't really matter anymore. And so that stuff has changed. And that's not just in Evansville. That's anywhere. But that stuff has changed. And I mean, again, where we're from at Floyd Central, you wouldn't have ever dreamed of going to New Albany, just the same if you were in New Albany, you'd never have dreamed of going to Jeffersonville. And that stuff has changed so much. AAU has created, which, you watch the NBA, these super teams. Well, AAU's done the same thing. And hell, like I said, it's not too far from doing it in high school.
Yeah, and we look at it, you talk about that, it used to be kind of a community thing, our community against their community and all that, and that was part of the fun and part of the enjoyment of it. And now you mentioned AAU, and Indiana has the open transfer, you can go wherever you want. And then also class basketball has come into effect, obviously, and at first I thought maybe that was good, but I don't know, man. It just seems to have eroded some of the fabric of Indiana basketball.
Indiana, I remember in '89 when we were seniors and we went to the Final Four and got upset, or not upset, we got beat by Kokomo. And Montross and Leary won it for Lawrence North. And, the next year was Bailey's senior year. And then the next year, I believe, we went class. And I remember being at IU, Chris Reynolds, our teammate at IU, kind of always laughed about it because he's like, man, you guys had one of the greatest things ever over there. Why'd you mess it up? Of course, he's from Illinois, where I think they have 6 classes, and he would even say that was always looked at as kind of prestigious. Maybe not it was the best thing. It was just kind of a different thing. Man, there was only one champion in that state. And when they switched that, again, I'm not smart enough to argue this, but I think they did it for the financial gain. And I don't know, maybe it has gained in finances with IJ. I don't think it has. I go to an awful lot of gyms in sectionals, regionals, and semi-states, and they weren't packed the way they were back in the late 80s and early 90s. I mean, back then you couldn't – I remember in high school they were scalping tickets at the sectionals, regionals, and semi-states. And now you're handing tickets away. And I just don't think it's helped financially, but I thought it was great the way it was. I always told the story. I did an interview a couple weeks ago where I talked about growing up in Borden, and I went to Floyd Central, obviously. But if Borden could have upset the big boy, up in the Jasper area, Southridge, and these schools, when that small school can upset the big boy school, even for sectional, that makes the year. And I know it's not a state championship, but even if you can upset the big boy or the big dog or the big brother up the road, that was a big thing back in that day. And
it was a legacy.
You could have some statues built if you could just upset the big boy down the road, and that's gone nowadays.
Yeah, and then we move on to college, and Indiana is not what it was when you were there right now. They're trying to get back there, and one of the things that Archie Miller has talked about is recruiting inside out the Indiana players, because under the Tom Crean era, they kind of got away from that. Archie is doing seems to be a good job of getting the Indiana kids back in, and I don't think people understand it's not just because they're from Indiana, but a kid from Indiana is different than a kid from another state, at least in my opinion, because basketball is ingrained in them from the very start.
I think there's something to that, and again, when I say this, I don't want to offend the other 49 states, and that's not in any way, shape, or form what I'm doing. I do think that, and I may move it out just a little bit and say Midwest, but I can only speak for when I was playing. Back in that day, a Midwest basketball player had a different thing about him. I don't know what it was. I'm not saying we were back in that day any more talented than what kids are today from the Midwest or outside the Midwest. Probably weren't as talented. But the thing is, there was a Midwestern style of basketball play, in my opinion, that the Gene Cadys, the Bob Knights, those coaches loved, and probably weren't they may argue with me, but I think we were very easy to coach. I think we had great high school coaching. I think maybe there was a little bit of a plateau where we were built on something, and then we grew when we got to college, but we had a little bit of a levelness to us when we got there. And plus, it's like I always said, when I went to IU, the guys that I played with, and of course I went with seven. There were 7 of us freshmen, but we were all good kids from good families, good education, had to go to class in high school. I mean, I hear of stories in today's world where kids are going to, 3, 4 different high schools in 3 or 4 different years. It's amazing to me throughout the country. And again, we start getting into that AAU stuff. But I'm just telling you, the kids that I went to, they were all good kids. I'm not saying rich, poor, whatever. We were all different, but we all kind of had the same basis. We all kind of had the same instincts. And, well, all those kids that we went to, and a couple didn't make it. Chris Lawson transferred and Thunderberg transferred. But I'm just saying, as a core whole, we were just pretty level-headed. And Knight always, Knight's, I don't think it's something I'm making up. I mean, Coach Knight recruited parents as much as he recruited players. And so when we got there, we were probably one step ahead of the game. And then, you get up there and then you go back to ground zero because then you know nothing. But it was a different time. And I think Coach Knight was one of the best. And I think Coach Cady was also very good at, recruiting parents just the same as players.
And I've always said that teams that you were on were no doubt the greatest teams in the history of IU to not win a national championship. Some bad things came into play, injury to you, of course, and your foot that you had to deal with. Alan Henderson also. But, man, the guys that were on, like they came before you, Eric Anderson, a great guy that we had sadly lost way too soon, and Brian Nover, Brian Evans, Matt Nover that came after you. And then to go along with all the talent you had around you, Todd Leary and Chris Reynolds, Greg Graham, Calbert Cheney, and Pat Graham. Man, that was a group from start to finish that was crazy good. Jamal Meeks, I mean, it's unbelievable the talent that was in that stretch while you were at IU.
Yeah, it was that was a fun time. And, it's not like it's – I don't ever remember looking at it like it was a competition. And it was I always said the 5 years I was up there, obviously, the biggest thing was having a Calbert Cheney, who was without question for 4 years your best player, for 4 years your hardest worker, and for 4 years probably the most naive kid, because I don't think until probably his junior year did he know how good he was. And it was just a bunch of guys that, I don't think it's any secret that when you won at Indiana, the week was a lot easier than if you lost. And so if you just it was very military-like. It was very much, if you win, this is going to be a fun week. Not that it'd be easy, but it was a fun week. And if you lost, you were going to have to pay the piper. And so we figured out real quick, it's not how many you score, it's not how much playing time you get. Just figure out how to win, and then we move on. And we did that for 5 years, and things worked out that way. But it was very much, it was Calvert's team. We all knew it. It took us about 3 or 4 or 5 games our freshman year to figure it out. But after we figured it out, and of course he was the best at that because he was the hardest worker, and you never took any days off and all that good stuff. But yeah, you win. It was fun. You lost. It wasn't so much. And that's kind of the way we played it every year, not every year, every week. That was kind of your mindset. And so that was kind of our game plan from start of the season to the end of the season.
And you guys, and I'm not saying all 13 or however many that there were, but you guys were tight too. I mean, it was a unique group and a group of characters. Some really fun guys on that team. Like I mentioned, Eric Anderson was a great one. Yourself, Jamal Meeks, Todd Leary, Bailey was on there as well. I mean, what a group of characters that had to make it fun, because you have to have fun because it's a serious deal. It's almost like a job.
The 7 freshmen, my senior year, 6 of us lived in the dorm together, and Funderburk had an apartment off the side, and because he kind of was a late sign, and the following year we all moved we moved to apartments, and there was Jackson Heights Apartments is where most of us live, and there was a lot of football players, and there was a lot of wrestlers that were there, and there was a lot of basketball players, and I learned quickly that, you're with these guys so much that I normally didn't room with a basketball player. Now, that didn't mean that they weren't 27 steps down the way, but I normally always roomed with a friend and not so much a basketball player. It was a great group of guys, and we were all from different areas, but we were most of us were Midwest kids, if not Indiana kids. We all got along. It's like I said, was there a couple guys that I played with I didn't care for? Yeah, probably, but they probably said the same thing about me. But when you were on the floor, it was absolute 100% team-oriented, win at all costs, anything for your playing partner, and that's just the way it was. Now, when we got there as freshmen, we were taught that by the Jeff Alphonse, the Mark Robinson, the Eric Anderson, Jamal Meeks. That was ingrained. I mean, that's just the way it was, and that's the way it was when they were freshmen. And it just went over. And of course, when I was a junior and senior and maybe took a little bit more of a leadership role than as a freshman, that's what you tried to instill in those guys. And it just kept, Knight was very good at, he never really told us that. It was that's just the way it was. Again, it was very military-like. You come in as a newbie, you are taught, it's not like we had to carry all the bags off the plane or anything. It wasn't never that type of stuff. It was just freshmen. This is how you're going to act, and this is how we're going to play. And you got a real quick dab into what this is actually here, and it is about wins and losses, and that is it. And it's not about, your average or where you're going in the pros or where they got you projected. I mean, Calvert never even heard of that stuff. Alan Henderson never even heard of that stuff when he was at IU, or those guys were at IU. And, I blame a little bit on that. Social media is here to stay, but on the flip side, social media wasn't around back then. And that has changed a lot of the way basketball and football and baseball and tennis or whatever the heck you play. That has changed the world a lot. But, yeah, Calvert Chaney was never – everybody in the country knew he was one of the best players in the country. But as far as, the agents and all the NBA talk, it just wasn't around the way it is today. It's changed tremendously.
And one of the things that I see, and I'm not asking you to agree with this part, but mental toughness, the teams you played on, man, those guys would run through brick walls. When I watched today, or the team I watched last year, that was completely lacking. I didn't see mental toughness. I didn't see a team playing together. And I see such a difference. And I'm not saying that's every year and every team, but, man, it's a marked difference because that's something that you never had to worry about before. And now it seems like it's hit or miss, not just for Indiana. I mean, just in college basketball or sports in general. I mean, too many people sometimes seem to be on their own agenda, I guess.
Yes. I think you're right. I think even the Coach Krzyzewski's of the world, who, he's one of the greatest all-time coaches in not only basketball, of any sport, I think he has to deal with that type of stuff today. That's where I have said, Archie Miller's the right coach or the wrong coach. I don't know that. Here's what I do know. A guy needs anywhere from 3 to 5 years to do what he has to do. And I've used this example for years. I said back when Steve Alford was there and Callaway and those guys, and they won that national championship with Hillman and those guys, Dean Garrett, Keith Smart. I said they were in the Final Four of the team out of UNLV, and I said, if you want to take Tarkanian and you want to give him the Alford team, and you want to take Coach Knight and give him the UNLV team, I said, I'm going to tell you there's 2 teams that wouldn't have won it, and that was Vegas and Indiana. I said, a coach has his way of doing things. A coach has his style of doing things. And until he has time to get those kids, you're just playing a game that he can't win, nor can the team win. And I said a coach has to have time to get his style players, his type of kid, his type of players in there, and then go from there. And I think I told this story 3 or 4 weeks ago. I said Matt Painter, who we played AAU together in high school, same year in '89. And, Matt's first year at Purdue was, I think his first game as a head basketball coach at Purdue was at University of Evansville, and I was at that game. And I said, that may be the worst Big Ten team I've ever seen in my entire life, and it was the Purdue team. I don't know how many years he's been there. It feels like 30, but he's been at Purdue and done some really good things. Well, at the start, it wasn't all peaches and cream, and it took him time to get what he wanted done. And so I think every coach deserves that opportunity to do that and get their type of players and their type of style. I said if Archie Miller can win at Dayton, he can win at Indiana. But, again, there's people that you didn't win your first year. Your second year doesn't look – well, again, if you're a team that's – Kentucky's really the only team, Duke maybe a little bit, this one-and-done stuff. But if you're not a team that's worried about just getting one-and-dones, I said you got to give a coach a few years to get his taste in there.
Yeah, I look at Trey Galloway, the most recent commitment to Indiana, and some people may think this is crazy, but I think that might be one of the most important recruits he's had to date, not because he's the best. Trace Jackson is obviously great. Romeo is in the NBA. But Trey Galloway is his type of player. He's a kid that seems to play with mental toughness, that plays with a coach's son's smarts, that has the ability to stay there for 4 years, and he's a utility type player. He can shoot, or he can drive, or play defense. He's that tough, kind of a throwback to the 1989 group to me. But to me, he's the style that Archie's looking for, at least the start of that. And for that reason, I think he might be one of the most important recruits he's signed to date.
I'm not saying Bob Knight hung the moon here. What I'm saying is Galloway would have been a kid that Bob Knight would have recruited. Simple as that. My dad jokes with us all the time, and Todd Leary and I have spoke about this. I know Todd Leary and myself and Brian. I know we were all good players coming out of high school. That's not what I'm questioning. What I'm questioning is if we were coming out of high school today, would we be getting recruited by the Indianas, the Purdues, the Kentuckys, the Louisvilles, and all these schools? And you think about that, that's the question mark. And I don't know. I don't know where we would fit in today's game being recruited. But I do know this, the Galloway kid is a kid I'll say the word style, the style of play that back in the 89, 90 years, he would have fit in with us. Just kind of, like you said, kind of a throwback kid, win at all costs, does everything. I don't know what he does great. I know he does a lot of things really well. And that's kind of the way we all were back in that day. You know, you did everything pretty well. Yes, I could shoot it, and this guy could rebound, or this Calvert was great pull up, or whatever everyone kind of had a strength, maybe your go-to thing, but you were decent at everything. And he very much is that type of player.
So you speaking of your dad, I think your dad's name's John. You both just had a birthday recently.
Yes, back in mid-July. Yeah, we did. Both on the same day. And, hell, he forgets and I forget, and we forget each other's age, too. So if my wife and my mom don't remind us, we'd never remember it.
And I've talked to Todd about, because I know Todd's a golfer. He loves to golf. We've talked about going and playing. And I said, well, does Pat play? So, well, Pat doesn't play a lot anymore, more into fishing. And I've seen the pictures. I think you went down to either Lake Barkley or Cumberland not too long ago for a fishing trip. How's the fishing been?
Well, down in Kentucky Lake and Barkley, I love going down there, and the Asian carp's gotten taken a hold down there. It's not as what it once was, but when I first moved to town, I met a family by the name of Brinkers down here that were life golfers. I mean, that was their life. And I was competitive enough and dumb enough to get kind of involved in it, and kind of got to where I worked on that a lot, and I fell in love with it. But then on the flip side, it's a 6 to 8 hour day on Saturday and Sundays when you do it. And I fell out of love with it real quick, but I've always enjoyed bass fishing, so that's kind of my favorite. But I get rid of these kids, I'm gonna get back on the fishing game a little bit more.
Well, it's a fun, easy type of thing. But getting back to Indiana basketball, I know you follow them. You don't get to make it. When's the last time you've actually got to make it to a game? Because now you've got kids, you're coaching basketball. You're also coaching at Evansville Memorial as well, correct?
Yeah, I coach, and so that takes, with pregame and scouting and all that stuff. I just can't get up to Bloomington the way I used to, and I try to get up there as much as I can. About 3 years ago, I think, was the last time I was there. I haven't seen a game the last 2 years in Bloomington, but I obviously watch every game I can on television and stay up with them, and obviously still root for them. I mean, that's where my heart is, and I try to stay away from the negativity as much as possible, because, like I said, I just know how difficult it is, and especially with what Archie has up there, even with Coach Crean up there. And it doesn't matter. It feels like, most people that are IU fans feel it's been, 50 years since Bob Knight was up there, but you're still following that name. And it's never, well, Kelvin Sampson did this or Mike Davis did this. No one ever brings those guys' names up. They're still following the Knight ghost, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I still, they still have such a name to follow. Whoever takes that job, it's still the Bob Knight ghost that lives up there, and he's, again, he's got a tough road to go. But on the flip side, I can't imagine coaching anywhere else. I think it's one of the top, still should be one of the top programs in the country. I know we have fell off here in the last years, but I still think that has a chance to be one of the best jobs in the country, just as the Kentuckys, the Louisvilles, and anybody else. And, again, I wish you nothing but the very best.
And, you speaking of the Kentuckys and Louisvilles, Indiana has played Louisville the last couple of years, but Kentucky, for people like me who grew up in southern Indiana, man, I didn't care about Purdue. I didn't really know that Purdue was that big of a rival until I got to IU. But Kentucky, to me, was always the big rival. And that's a series that went on forever. It was one of the best series in college basketball. And now, of course, we don't have that. And, man, that sucks to me. And I think that's something that should be brought back as soon as possible. But I don't see any change coming anytime soon. But, man, that's something that I greatly miss. And I know that a ton of Hoosier fans miss as well.
Well, and I've always told this story. When I went to IU, I had family that were Purdue fans. I had family and friends that were Kentucky fans, and living down where we did, where you were 10 minutes from University of Louisville, an hour and a half from Bloomington, an hour and a half from Lexington, and then 3 hours from Lafayette. It just was basketball haven back in that day. And so when I went to Bloomington, the Todd Learys and these guys that were from Indianapolis and Greg Graham, it was, their parents can't go to work on the day after Purdue loss. And I'm sitting here thinking, Purdue loss, I'm more worried about the Kentucky game. And it was always kind of a running joke. And granted, you had to play Purdue twice, but the Kentucky thing was just always such a big part of me, just again from where I grew up. And to have lost that, I hate it. But it all comes down to finances, and I don't know really who's in control of that. And I can't believe and imagine that game's not on the docket year in and year out, just as Kentucky and Louisville should be on the docket, and Indiana and Louisville should play. And it's just the way it is. If Purdue or Indiana ever leaves the Big Ten and that we lose that game, I mean, that's silly. But I don't know who makes that call. A lot of people blame it on Calipari, and a lot of people blame it on this or that. And to be honest with you, I'm not smart enough to understand all those, positive and negatives. I just know I wish the game would happen, but it's going to be probably a long time before it ever does.
We'll certainly see. I hope not, but I'm afraid that you're correct. We'll certainly find out. What's new for Pat Graham? What's coming up? I know you guys got the basketball season that's down the road a little bit. Anything coming up for the rest of the summer that you're looking to do?
No, I actually worked out all summer, had a good summer, and then school starts next week, and I kind of enjoy the boys home. I'm not big on school starting, but you got one more year, and then that one's off to college, and then I don't know what I'll do. I guess I'll go back to the fishing thing, but we've got most of our stuff done, kind of getting ready for next week's school starting, so get ready for that.
Well, we started doing the post-game shows with Todd last year, so we're probably going to be doing something down there from Evansville on the road games, so you can come out and join us some whenever you're able. Now, I have to let you know that Todd makes me call him the Todd Father now.
He just called me. I've been called so much in my lifetime. I'll just be called Pat, and I'll be happy.
Yeah, just kidding. He doesn't really, but I made that up. But he's a character. He did come up with the fact that he wants to have a Toddcast.
Oh yeah, he can always think of it. I'll promise you that. He's thought about it all,
and he'll certainly let you know, won't he?
I'm like, you got more ideas. I said, I don't have enough time to come up with as many ideas as you do, but he's a good one. He's a good one.
He is. We appreciate Todd. We love him to death, man. We're grateful to have him. But I couldn't be any more grateful for you for taking the time, Pat. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I'm grateful for you to have spent your time with us, and look forward to when we get closer to the season, having you on again. Value your opinions and your thoughts on IU basketball and IU overall. But, man, thank you so much.
Well, hopefully we can get things going back the better way. And anytime I can come on or do anything for you, I don't ever mind giving my opinion on it. Might not be what everybody wants to hear, but I'm probably like Leary a little bit. I don't mind giving it.
Well, we appreciate it, brother, and say hello to the family, your wife, and we look forward to running into you sometime soon. But thank you so much, and good luck as the season approaches for you guys there at Evansville Memorial.
Thank you very much. Best of luck.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for listening to the rebroadcast from today's edition of Indiana Sports Beat with Jim Coyle, the only daily show dedicated to Indiana University athletics. You can catch us live each weekday on IndianaSportsBeat.com, TheDailyHoosier.com, GrowingTruth.com, or go to Spreaker.com for live notifications. Yeah, that's Speaker with an R, SPREAKER.com. You can also catch the entire show any place you listen to a podcast, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, etc. You can find and follow the show on Facebook or follow me on Twitter at Jim Coyle ISB for complete coverage of the Indiana Hoosiers. Thanks again. I hope you have a great day. I'm Jim Coyle, and I will see you on the radio.